Massachusetts, Ms. Songus is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today with my colleagues from Massachusetts to thank the law enforcement officers, medical professionals, first responders, and citizen heroes for their incredible bravery and sacrifice during and after the tragic events last week at the Boston Marathon. Given the time constraints, I'd like to now yield to my colleague from Massachusetts, Bill Keating.
I'd like to thank my colleague for yielding, and I'd like to thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank so many of our colleagues that we work with day in, day out. When we came here back into session, so many of them gave their heartfelt feelings for all those that were hurt during the terrible marathon bombing that occurred in Boston on April 15th. You know, we first remember those that lost their lives during this terrible, terrible tragedy, and there's never words that are adequate to deal with these issues. The type of loss to family, to friends, to loved ones can't really be put into words. I can only convey my own and all our colleagues' sympathy for those families. 4 young people whose lives were taken too quickly from us all. 4 people who had so much to give. 4 people who we had a glimpse of with the accounts of their lives as the public mourned and joined with their families at their loss. It was just a glimpse, but what a glimpse. A young boy, Martin Richard, with a profound message. As his poster revealed to all, no more hurting people, peace. Lindsay Liu, who came here from another country to study, to better herself, an accomplished student, pianist, a young woman who had developed tremendous friendships in the short time she was here, who came to this country to learn more, to become more, and to offer more. Sean Collier, young police officer, who dedicated himself to helping people, to protect and to serve. That was his goal, who gave his life just doing that. Crystal Campbell, a young woman, vibrant, a person who, despite a busy life, busy schedule, put much of her life on hold over a year to help her grandmother when she was ill. The first responders and the people that were injured, over 280, including Richard Donahue, an MBTE police officer who participated with Watertown Police in slowing down these perpetrators before they could harm more people, and was seriously injured, and we pray for him in the process. The first responders to the scene, including civilians, who just risked everything they had to provide emergency aid and help to those runners and those bystanders who were there. The first responders that had been trained for years for terrible moments like this, who sacrificed their safety moving forward. EMTs, police officers, firefighters. The incredible medical community in the Boston area, some of whom ran to work knowing what happened, who were there ready, the emergency room, doors opened, everything in place, saving lives. We honor the citizens in our area who all gave up a small part of their freedom, listening to their leaders who displayed good judgment, common sense, moving forward to put their safety first. You know, those lives of these young people, these 4 young people that aren't with us now, as well as the lives of those people that are recovering from the injuries and those first responders that helped us. They will not be defined by a depraved act of violence of 2 individuals. These people are the definers themselves. Givers, people that care. That's who we are. They define us, the best in us, the selfless side of us. They define the best of what's Boston. They define the best of what is in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They define the best of us as Americans. And they are all to be remembered today. It's a time to put politics aside and remember what a great country we have because of individuals like this. I yield back my time.
I thank the gentleman and appreciate very much his heartfelt comments. At this time, I'd like to yield to my colleague from Rhode Island, David Cicilline.
I thank the gentlelady very much for yielding and thank my other colleagues for accommodating me. My home is in Providence, Rhode Island, which is about an hour south of Boston. 2 weeks ago, several of my friends and neighbors traveled to Boston to compete in the marathon. And when I first learned of these horrific attacks, my thoughts immediately turned to them and their families. Like all Rhode Islanders, I've kept the people of Boston and their loved ones in my thoughts and prayers over the past 2 weeks. It's in moments such as this that words fail to adequately describe the pain we feel in our hearts, our continuing sense of disbelief, and the anger we hold toward those responsible for such a senseless and vicious attack. The actions of these 2 individuals that demonstrated such a careless disregard for so many lives, some were ended and many more irreversibly changed. These attacks were an attempt to shake the very foundation of our democratic and free society. But after these bombs exploded on a beautiful sunny day in Boston, and we saw the incredible harm caused to so many, we also witnessed the very best of humanity in the courageous actions of the brave men and women who responded to this attack, helped care for the injured, and relentlessly pursued their perpetrators and brought them to justice. We think about those brave police officers and first responders who witnessed these attacks firsthand and instinctively raced towards the source of these blasts so that they could assist the wounded and keep others from harm. We think also about a 26-year-old MIT campus police officer who was murdered as he worked to keep his community safe. We think about an MBTA transit police officer who never hesitated when he answered a call to report immediately to Watertown and continues to fight after sustaining life-threatening injuries trying to apprehend these suspects. Sometimes it takes a tragic event to remind us of the incredible sacrifices our first responders make every single day. And the heroism demonstrated by these men and women in the face of such overwhelming danger helps remind us just how much we owe to those who keep our communities safe in cities and towns all across this country. These attacks were designed to strike fear and intimidate the people of Boston and all Americans. But instead, they brought out the very best that our country has to offer, not just in the actions we saw from men and women in Boston, but in the generosity shown by those who gave blood, donated money, and did everything they could to bring any measure of relief for the victims and their families. I join my colleagues in applauding their service today and ask that all of us remember the responsibility that those of us in the House have to serve our first responders and to continue to keep the families affected by this attack in our thoughts and prayers. I thank the gentlelady for yielding, and I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, on April 15th and in the days after, local, state, and federal law enforcement personnel from across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and nearby states, Rhode Island and New Hampshire, joined in a week-long effort to respond to the marathon bombing and assist in finding and capturing the suspects. These dedicated first responders saved hundreds of lives in the immediate aftermath of the attack and saved countless more from the threat of future attacks. Through unprecedented communication and confident leadership, public safety agencies at every level coordinated to bring justice down upon those responsible. Their actions prove that no act of terror can blunt the spirit of resiliency, of fortitude, of endurance that is at the heart of the American people. As relief and pride wash over the Boston area, we must not forget that there is still much healing to be done. Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with the families of Martin Richard, a young boy whose big smile we will never forget, and whose sign, "No more hurting people, peace," is a living challenge to all of us. Crystal Campbell, a fine young woman who, since she could, has attended virtually every marathon day, and so emblematic of the great event that it is for the city of Boston, but also for the entire Commonwealth and region. And Lu Lingzi, a young student from China, so emblematic of the ways in which Boston's great academic institutions draw people from across the world to share in the great treasure that we have there, but also to participate in those great days that are uniquely American, like Patriots' Day. And Officer Sean Collier, somebody beloved by the student body. I had several MIT students in to see me just a couple of days ago. They said everybody knew him and everybody liked him. And the more than 200 innocent people, a number from my district, who suffered severe injuries from this senseless attack. We want to remember and encourage all of them as they go forward. Jeff Bowman, who suffered tragic loss of limbs, but who, as he came out of surgery, was able to help identify the suspects. The Corcoran family, a mother and daughter who are currently sharing a hospital room together as they begin the long journey of recovery, but who are already having tremendous assistance. Lowell High School, where Crystal is a student, sent prom tickets to be sure that she would make her way there. And many amputees who've successfully gone on to new lives were in the waiting room, waiting to encourage them as they go forward and to show them what is possible. Also from my district, Brittany Loring, Stephen Byrne, James Gauntlet, David Yepes, many members of the White family, the Broussard family, and Roseanne Sadaya. Remarkable people who share in a tremendous and troubling moment in our history. I'd also like to remember some other specific people who have roots to my district. Commissioner Ed Davis. I have known Commissioner Davis since his early days on the beat in my hometown of Lowell. During a 28-year career at the Lowell Police Department, Davis worked as a beat cop, a detective, and a vice and narcotics officer, being named chief in 1994. During his time in Lowell, Chief Davis helped to turn around our city and set it off into an age of growth. We were proud of him when he left to become the Boston Police Commissioner, and we are even more proud of him now. Commissioner Davis showed extraordinary intelligence, professionalism, poise, and confidence from Monday through the capture of the suspects on Friday. He was a calming influence in a time of great chaos and crisis. He deserves our thanks, the gratitude of the people of Boston, of our Commonwealth, and of our country. And I commend Special Agent in Charge Richard DeLaurier, who proved himself extremely capable during the entire crisis as he oversaw the massive operation of identifying and tracking down the suspects and helped bring the swift arm of justice down upon those responsible. And also, at times of great crisis, we look to our leaders for guidance and confidence. Our leaders, city, state, and federal, did not shy away, but rather confronted the chaos head-on, challenged the evil, and pushed forward so that we could together, as one community, arrive quickly at healing and justice. In particular, Mayor Tom Menino. This mayor came from the hospital to be involved in the aftermath and suspect search. Seeing him on television in a wheelchair gave everyone a great feeling of pride and a tremendous couldn't help but notice how deeply he cares for the city he has so ably overseen for many years. He embodies the grit and toughness that Boston is known for. He embodies Boston strong. Governor Deval Patrick was a true leader during a time of crisis. He helped oversee the coordination of so many agencies to ensure optimal collaboration. He made sure the public was up to date and aware of the situation as it developed, as we all watched moment to moment from our homes or wherever we might be. He stood with gravitas and a determined, strong composure that trickled down throughout the state public safety agencies. And we will always appreciate President Barack Obama's deep involvement since the start. His words during the service at the Cathedral of the Holy Cross were a touching example of our nation's unwavering resolve. As much as we are Boston strong, Commonwealth strong, we are all one, and we are all strong. And I have to say that the interfaith service was a remarkable moment when representatives of the many different faiths came together as we embark on a journey of healing and reassurance about the unity, strength, and resiliency that Boston is known for. It was a uniquely American day. The marathon that is much celebrated draws people from across the world, across our country, across Massachusetts. A great Red Sox game, many go from one event to the other, and Patriots Day, which commemorates the beginning of the American Revolution, the reenactment of Paul Revere's Ride, and the shot heard round the world, and the commemoration that takes place in my district. All of that is to say that we will work hard to follow up with and be strong supporters of those who still seek to recover, make sure they have all the necessary resources going forward, and that they have the strong support of their community and friends, and that we will do all that it takes to move forward from this tragic moment and make of it something good that brings us all together and help to continue on a path, this country on a path of healing. With that, I'd like to recognize my colleague, Mr. McGovern, my colleague from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern.
Mr. Speaker, I first want to thank my colleague, Nikki Songas, for organizing today's special order, and I thank her for the time. And it is with immense gratitude that I rise to honor Massachusetts first responders today. While I'm always proud to call myself a resident of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, being from Massachusetts has carried a very special significance these past 12 days. The tragic bombings that occurred on April 15th took 3 precious innocent lives and caused hundreds of others to suffer devastating wounds. A former intern of mine, Patrick Downs, and his wife Jess were wounded, and I want them to know that we are continuing to pray for them and for all the others who are wounded. And we also remember Officer Sean Collier, an MIT police officer who was shot and killed, and our prayers are with his family. So many lives were upended by this tragic, senseless act of violence. Citizens of the Commonwealth and Americans across the country are still coping with the horror of the bombings that took place on what is normally a celebratory day in Massachusetts, Patriots Day. Amidst these acts of violence and terror, our belief in the fundamental goodness of people is strengthened when we reflect on the courageous acts of so many in the wake of such a tragedy. I want to recognize the incredible sacrifices of Massachusetts first responders and the sacrifices that they made from the moment the bombs went off until the time the final suspect was apprehended. And even as we speak, victims are still being treated by medical professionals at some of the world's finest hospitals, like Massachusetts General, Beth Israel Deaconess, Boston Medical Center, Brigham and Women's, and Boston's Children's Hospital, among others. Police, firefighters, medical professionals, members of the National Guard, even ordinary citizens rushed to the scene of the bombing last week in order to help the wounded, potentially putting themselves in harm's way. Sleep was the last thing on the minds of many of these selfless men and women who worked back-to-back shifts in support of the communities they call home. The extraordinary response of the Boston medical community is very much a part of the story of the 2013 Boston Marathon. The explosions took place at 2:50 p.m. Emergency medical teams mobilized immediately, and 35 minutes later, after the injured were swiftly and efficiently stabilized, transported, and triaged at hospitals throughout the city, the first patient was wheeled into an operating room. Nurses, doctors, all medical personnel simply showed up to help. I want to recognize the incredible leadership of President Obama, of Governor Deval Patrick, and Boston Mayor Tom Menino. They offered words of comfort. They reassured us, and they helped us get through this terrible ordeal. And I was particularly moved to see Mayor Menino, who is recovering from a broken leg, stand tall and lead his great city. I also want to recognize Richard Deloriers, the special agent in charge of the Boston FBI and an Assumption College graduate, for his outstanding work which led to the apprehension of the final suspect. They have all made our state very proud. At the interfaith service last week, we showed the world that Boston and Massachusetts will not be deterred. We are a resilient community, and we will emerge from this stronger than ever. In a week where we saw the very best and worst of human behavior on display, I am proud to say that Massachusetts' best, our first responders, triumphed. While we continue to reflect on the tragedies of last week, we move forward with a renewed sense of pride, knowing that their exceptional commitment to public service is what makes us all Boston strong. I thank the gentlelady for yielding me the time, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman and appreciate his comment and the fact that we are all coming together to talk about this event. We're still working very hard to comprehend. And with that, I'd like to yield to my colleague, our newest member from Massachusetts, Congressman Kennedy.
I'd like to begin by thanking the gentlelady from Massachusetts for the opportunity and, most importantly, excuse me, for pulling us all together here today to mark a moment that none of us will ever forget, and a signature moment in Massachusetts history. I also want to begin by recognizing the victims of the horrific attacks that happened last Monday. Thoughts and prayers are with them and their families as they begin a long road to recovery. I think, like many of my colleagues from Massachusetts, and like so many people from Massachusetts and from really around the country and around the world, have always delighted in Marathon Monday. I don't know how many times I went out and watched the runners as they ran by on their quest to the finish line in Boylston Street. My stepmother has actually run the marathon a number of times, and together with my dad and brother, we would often go down to Heartbreak Hill to watch the runners at the time that they need it most. And as you see all the runners run by, I think one of the things that always stuck with me was how many people were there cheering them on. And if you think about it, it's 26.2 miles with people from the very beginning in Hopkinton to the end on Boylston Street in Boston, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows deep on each side of the street, sitting there, screaming, yelling, offering a bottle of water, or literally a hand to those that are striving for an incredible feat of personal endurance and excellence. And that's really, I think, to me, what that marathon, what that day is all about. It's about a community that comes together to cheer on not just the runners, but to celebrate what we have built together. To recognize that that day isn't just about those individual feats of excellence, but about a community that is willing to cheer on complete strangers. For runners to know, and you'll hear it if you talk to those that have competed in that race, that yes, it's an extraordinarily difficult course, but that Boston is one of the best marathons to run because there is always a crowd that is there to carry you through to the finish line. Complete strangers, people you will never see before and never see again, but they are there to offer a hand. And so it was with great sadness, but also great pride, that I watched the events unfold on Monday. To see complete strangers run into danger rather than flee from it. To see our first responders answer a call of bravery without hesitation. To meet the doctor that, after running the marathon and completing 26.2 miles, ran to work so that he could get started helping save victims. To meet some of the victims and their families. To know that we will never, despite how much we have come together, be able to replace Martin and Crystal and Lou and Officer Collier. But that the long path to recovery, that we will be there with them for every step of the way. That to recognize the law enforcement officers that put themselves in grave danger, never quite knowing what might happen or what weapons these two terrible individuals might have on them, that took great risks for the sake of safety for our own communities. To the investigators and the prosecutors that now have the long task of bringing these individuals to justice. To our sports teams, to the 17,000 strong that sang the national anthem in Boston Garden, and the 30,000 plus that belted it out at Fenway Park. To Mayor Menino, Vice President Biden, and President Obama for their leadership in this difficult time. To the One Fund for Boston that in shortly over 10 days has already grown to over $20 million, pouring in from citizens from around the country to help provide a little bit of relief to those who will need it most in this long road to recovery. It is an extraordinary message, a powerful symbol that gets back to what Boston and Massachusetts has always been about. From the first people that set foot on our shores, the earliest settlers and the pilgrims, that we have each other's backs, and we always will. And that next year, on Patriots' Day, the marathon will be run more crowded and louder than ever. And with that, I yield back.
I thank my colleague for his very insightful comments. It's so true. It's the spirit of community that was so evident. It's embedded in the race itself, the marathon itself. It's something that was so evident as everybody responded as the bombs went off to tragic effect. It's been followed up with all the tremendous outpouring of contributions, both to individual funds as well as the One Fund. And at the smallest of ways, as I mentioned, when Lowell High School sent prom tickets to Sydney Corcoran, wanting to make sure that she would be able to attend, and also that spirit of help from across the country to have a young man who lost his leg in a shark attack in Hawaii at his own expense come to Boston to visit with some of those who had sadly lost their legs, to say, yes, you're going to be not fine, forever changed, but your life will be very productive and positive. We have seen this over and over again, and I thank you for your comments. And with that, I would like to recognize my colleague from New Hampshire, Congresswoman Carol Shea Porter.
Thank you very much for having this moment and opportunity to talk about Boston and also to talk about the country and to talk about Boston's neighbor, New Hampshire. On that day, like so many others, I had a family member whose brother-in-law was running in that race. And he was running because his father had died of cancer. And so many people were running for causes that day. Fortunately, the family's fine, but some families were devastated beyond belief. But you know, Boston's a small city, but it's a great city. And New Hampshire's a small state, but it's a great state. And so what happens to Boston and what happens to Massachusetts is felt deeply in New Hampshire. You see, we work together, we play together, and we attend events together, and we also grieve together. And so when that call came to New Hampshire, when Boston reached out and asked our police forces to help, the answer from a Nashua SWAT team member was, of course we can. The answer from the Manchester SWAT team, Manchester, New Hampshire, was yes, and they were on their way. The answer from the Seacoast Emergency Response Team, CERT, that has officers from 11 different Seacoast communities, was yes. And the answer from the New Hampshire State Police SWAT and the Explosives Disposal Unit was yes, we'll be there. They understood the danger, but they also understood that they were needed. and they didn't hesitate. And the stories coming from that experience are very moving. One team reported how an elderly woman in Watertown had hidden behind her couch for hours. You can imagine the terror that the residents felt. And yet, our first responders were there, the police were there, the comfort was there. So as we pray for the victims and we remember those who died, the victims are also from New Hampshire and many other states, as we know, and somebody died from a foreign country. But we're all one. We're all Boston strong. And as we remember all of them, we thank our police officers and our first responders for always being there when we need them, because as they said when the call came, yes, of course we'll do that. Thank you very much for having this, and I yield back.
I thank the gentlewoman and appreciate very much her comments, as well as the shared commitment of Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts to responding to the horrific attacks. As we face the days ahead, Patriots' Day will continue to be a day when we commemorate a people who refuse to be terrorized and courageously defend the ideals on which our nation was founded. In the words of our great poet Ralph Waldo Emerson, quote, "Our flag will most defiantly remain unfurled in April's breeze." Thank you, and I yield back. Are we free to take a motion? Okay.
You want to see it? For what? From what?